There comes a point in every difficult season where you throw your hands up and say to God, I've done everything I can. It feels like the ultimate statement of surrender. But when you say those words with an attitude of defeat and resignation, you are doing something spiritually devastating. You are placing a human limit on the limitless power of God. You are literally shutting the door right in front of your own miracle. Today, I want to show you why giving up and surrendering are two entirely different things in the spiritual realm. We will explore how this innocent-sounding phrase blocks your blessings, and the exact biblical truth you need to hear when you have absolutely nothing left. This is the story of a mother who said those exact words about the one person she loved most, after years of trying everything. She believed she was finally surrendering. She had no idea she was about to discover the difference between the end of her strength and the end of the story. Her name was Claire, and for 7 years she had been carrying a burden that almost no one could see. It was not a battle with an illness or a bank account. It was a battle for her son. Somewhere in his early 20s, he had walked away from the family, away from the faith she had raised him in, away from nearly every value she had spent 18 years patiently pouring into him. The phone calls grew shorter, then stopped. The visits ended, and the boy who had once fallen asleep in her arms became a young man who would not return her messages. And Claire did everything a mother could do. She prayed, oh, how she prayed. On her knees at midnight, in her car at red lights, in the silence of an empty house. She wrote letters he never answered. She reached out again and again, quietly absorbing the silence each time. She sought counsel. She begged God. She tried tender words, and she tried honest ones. She did everything she knew how to do, and then she did it all again. There were small flickers of hope across those years that somehow made the silence even harder. A short text on her birthday one year that she read 50 times. A passing word from a relative that he had asked about her. Each flicker would lift her heart for a moment, and then weeks of nothing would follow, and the disappointment would settle a little deeper than before. Hope, she slowly learned, could be the most exhausting thing of all. And to protect herself from being crushed again, she began to expect less. Then less. Until one day she realized she had quietly stopped expecting anything at all. And after 7 years, she was simply empty. There was no strategy she had not attempted, no prayer she had not prayed, no door she had not knocked on. So one evening, sitting alone at her kitchen table, she folded her hands, looked up, and said the words that so many exhausted people say when they reach the very end of themselves. Lord, I've done everything I can. And here is what she believed she was doing in that moment. She believed she was finally surrendering, letting go, handing it over. It felt holy. It felt like peace. After 7 long years of striving, she was finally laying it down. But here is the question that changes everything. If those words were truly surrender, why did they leave her heart heavier instead of lighter? Why, in the day that followed, did she slowly stop praying for her son altogether? Why did "I've done everything I can" quietly become "there's no point anymore"? Because Claire had not actually surrendered. Without quite meaning to, she had given up. And though those two things can come out of your mouth sounding almost identical, in the spiritual realm they're opposites. One of them opens a door, the other closes it. And Claire could not yet see which one she had chosen. To understand what Claire's words were really doing, you have to understand the difference between two things the world constantly confuses. Giving up says, it's over. There is nothing more that can be done, not by me, and not by anyone, not even by God. Surrender says, there is nothing more that I can do, so now I am placing this into hands far stronger than my own. Do you hear the difference? Giving up ends the story. Surrender simply hands the pen to a better author. When Claire said, I've done everything I can, with that weight of defeat in her voice, she was not truly releasing her son to God. She was quietly announcing that the situation was finished, that because she'd run out of strength, the matter was now closed. And without ever intending to, she had done something staggering. She had measured the possibilities of Almighty God by the limits of her own tired hands. The Bible gives us a far better script for these moments. In 2 Chronicles chapter 20, King Jehoshaphat faced an enemy so overwhelming that defeat looked certain. And listen to how he prayed. He did not say, we have done everything we can. He said, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Do you see it? That is the godly version of the end of yourself. Not, it's over, but we are out of answers, so we are looking up. He took his complete helplessness and turned it, in a single breath, into expectation. And then there is one of the most freeing verses in all of Scripture, spoken to a people trapped between an army and a sea, with nowhere left to run. Exodus chapter 14 verse 14. The Lord will for you. You need only to be still. Stillness is not giving up. Stillness is the posture of someone who has stopped leaning on their own strength precisely because they have started leaning on God's. Giving up collapses in despair. Surrender grows still in trust. From the outside, they can look almost the same. On the inside, they could not be more different. And if you ever wonder whether your situation has simply gone too far to be reached, the prophet Jeremiah prayed a line worth memorizing. Jeremiah chapter 32 verse 17. Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Nothing. Not the child who has not spoken to you in years. Not the marriage everyone says is finished. Not the dream you buried so long ago you can barely remember its shape. The God who spoke entire galaxies into being is not standing at the edge of your impossible situation, wringing his hands. In truth, the only one who ever decided your situation was hopeless was you. If this is already touching a situation you have quietly written off, before we go any further, do one thing. Subscribe to this channel, and write in the comments, Lord, I am not giving up, I am handing it to you. Because what Claire discovered next is the truth that turns the end of your strength into the beginning of God's. For Claire, the danger of those words was never loud. It was quiet. Because the moment she decided the story was over, her heart slowly began to close. She stopped expecting. She stopped watching for any small sign of movement. She mistook her own exhaustion for faith and her own resignation for peace. And a heart that has stopped expecting anything from God will rarely notice when God begins to move. The real danger of giving up is not that God stops working, it is that we stop looking for him too. Claire saw the proof of this in a friend from church, a woman whose own grown daughter had been gone for nearly a decade, even longer than Claire's son had been distant. And then, with no warning anyone could explain, that daughter came home. When the woman shared the story, her eyes shining, Claire smiled and rejoiced with her. But quietly, something inside her ached. Because the woman admitted she had never once stopped praying, never stopped expecting, never decided it was over. And Claire could not say the same. Somewhere in the last year, she had closed a door her friend had simply kept open for 10. The turning point came on an ordinary Sunday, when Claire heard a familiar story preached as if she were hearing it for the very first time. It was the story of two sisters, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus. When Lazarus fell gravely ill, the sisters sent word for Jesus. But Jesus did not come right away. And by the time he arrived, Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. It was finished. By every human measure, it was far too late. And when Martha met Jesus on the road, she said something that landed in Claire's chest like a stone. She said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, it's too late now. The window has closed. There is nothing left that can be done. Claire knew that sentence intimately. She had been living inside it for years. It was simply a longer way of saying, I've done everything I can. But watch what Jesus did with too late. He walked straight to the tomb. He told them to roll the stone away, and Martha hesitated, because after 4 days, surely the situation was beyond all hope. And Jesus answered her with words that broke something open inside Claire. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Then he called into a grave that everyone had given up on, and a man who had been dead walked back out into the light. And in that moment, Claire finally understood. The very place where she had said, I've done everything I can, was not the end of the story at all. It was the exact spot where God does his most impossible work. Because God is not limited to the situations that still look possible to us. He specializes in the ones we have already buried. That word, buried, stopped her. Because that was exactly what she had done with her son's story. She had not handed it to God. She had quietly laid it in the ground and rolled a stone over it, and called her grief acceptance. But Jesus did not avoid the tombs. He walked straight toward them. The 4 days did not discourage him. If anything, the impossibility was the entire point, so that when life came rushing back, no one could mistake it for anything but the hand of God. She had been reading the limits of her own strength as the limits of God's power. But Ephesians chapter 3 verse 20 says something her defeat had completely forgotten. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Immeasurably more, not just a little more than you can manage. Immeasurably more than you were even able to imagine. The end of Claire's ability had never once been the end of God's. So that evening, Claire returned to her kitchen table. She folded her hands again. But this time, she prayed a completely different prayer. She said, Lord, it's true, I have done everything I can. I have nothing left, but I am not closing this door. I am handing it to you. Now it is your turn. It was not a magic spell, and the change did not arrive overnight. But something in Claire had been quietly reborn, not her strength, but her hope. She began to pray again, no longer out of striving, but out of trust. She began to watch again, expecting God to move in a story she had stopped trying to write herself. And in time, in a way she could never have arranged, on a timeline she did not control, the door she had once been ready to close began, ever so quietly, to open. And Claire would tell you now that the most important thing that changed was not her circumstances, those took time. The first thing that changed was her watching. Where she had once braced herself for nothing, she began again to expect something. Where she had once read God's silence as his absence, she began to trust that the silence might simply be the 4 quiet days before the stone is rolled away. She had spent 7 years trying to be strong enough to fix it. She would spend the rest of her life learning that she had never been the one who was meant to. Maybe, as you have listened, you have heard your own version of those words. Maybe you have said it about a marriage, a child, a dream, a long health battle, or a prayer you have prayed 1,000 times. I've done everything I can. And maybe you said it not in trust, but in defeat. If so, hear this gently but clearly. The end of your strength is not the end of your story. Giving up says the situation is finished because you are finished. But surrender says, I am finished, and that is exactly where God begins. One of them quietly places a human limit on a limitless God. The other simply steps back and finally gives him room to work. So stop handing your impossible situation a tombstone. Hand it instead to the one who calls buried things back to life. You are not giving up, you are giving it over. And the God who does immeasurably more than you can ask or imagine is never intimidated by a situation you have decided is too late. He is not asking you to manufacture more strength you simply do not have. He is asking you to take your hands off the stone and let him do what only he can do. Your part was never to raise the dead thing back to life. Your part is to believe, and to roll the stone away. If this message reached your heart today, I want you to do one thing right now. Write in the comments, Lord, now it is your turn. That is not a sentence of defeat. It is a declaration of trust, and heaven moves when it hears it. And if you know someone standing at the very end of their strength, ready to close a door God is not finished with, share this video with them today. It may be the word that helps them hold on a little longer. So we can keep growing together. God bless you deeply, my brother, my sister. Until next time.